Good afternoon, everyone. I want to welcome you to part 3 of our 4-part series on termite biology and control. Before we get started, I want to go over a few housekeeping rules. First of all, I would like everyone to please mute your line. I've kind of taken care of that on the back end, but if you become unmuted, please mute yourself. You can use the chat box to ask questions, and we'll be answering all the questions at the end of the webinar. For any additional questions not answered during the webinar, you can email us at education@nola.gov. This webinar will be posted on our website at www.nola.gov/mosquito and also on our YouTube channel. Today's topic is termite control. A good understanding of your termite control options is very important when choosing the best protection of your home. Today's speakers will be Dr. Carrie Catone and Dr. Claudia Rigo. Dr. Carrie Catone has been employed by the City of New Orleans Mosquito, Termite, and Rodent Control Board for the past 15 years. She received her PhD in entomology in 2011 as a distance education student at the University of Florida. Her research focused on survival mechanisms of Formosan subterranean termite colonies during times of prolonged flooding. Her current job duties include managing our termite control division and working with collaborators to test new products and formulations for termite treatments. Dr. Claudia Rigo earned her degrees from Purdue University, the University of Georgia, and obtained a PhD from the University of Florida. In 2004, she became Principal Research Entomologist for the City of New Orleans Mosquito, Termite, and Rodent Control Board. In 2006, she became Assistant Director, and in 2010, she was promoted to Director of the department. And now, Dr. Catone.
Okay, well, great. Thank you so much for that excellent introduction. So what we're going to be talking about today is the termite control methods that are out on the market, right? So our goal today is to give you as a homeowner the tools to understand the differences between termite treatments. We want you to end up being comfortable discussing your termite control options with a licensed pest control company. And we really just want you to feel confident in choosing a termite control method that works for both you and your home, right? Because all homes are built differently. There are different construction techniques, and all of that needs to be taken into consideration when choosing the proper termite control treatment. However, I will just put this disclaimer out there. We are not going to be endorsing any pest control company or termite control product. So I wanted to start today by giving you just a brief history of what termite control has been like through the years. So back in the 1800s through the early 1900s, termite control was just replacing damaged wood, okay, and that was considered maintenance. In 1928, the recommendation was then to remove the main colony nest and spray with a light oil or kerosene. These are things that we certainly wouldn't think about doing today, but that was standard practice back then. By the 1930s, we saw the first treated wood. So these were the creosote treatments, coal tar, petroleum. There were toxic paints, and even things that contained arsenic, right? Which we know now is quite toxic, but those were the first wood treatments. There were also preventative measures in place. So homeowners were told that they shouldn't have wood to ground contact. And we also saw the first soil insecticides. Okay, so that would be Terminex, which we know as a company now, but it was actually the first soil insecticide. And these termiticides were applied to trenches adjacent to the building's foundations, much like what we see today. Through the 1940s and 1950s, we saw an introduction of chlorinated hydrocarbons. These were things like DDT, chlordane, aldrin, and dieldrin. Now, we know that these things are not on the market anymore, and a lot of that has to do with the passing of the Federal Insecticide, Fungicide, and Rodenticide Act. This is also known as FIFRA for short. So this was enacted by Congress in 1947, and it was put in place to protect public health and welfare and prevent adverse effects to the environment, and to regulate pesticides that might have adverse effects to the environment. So it's been amended a few times since it's been enacted. And it states that the EPA is responsible for registering and authorizing pesticide use in the United States. So once that act was put into place, in 1972, we see DDT getting banned. Granted, it was a very effective insecticide, but it had some issues with persisting in our environment with bioaccumulation. Through 1983 to 1988, we saw a 5-year phase out of chlordane. Again, back in the day, this was known as a very effective termiticide to protect homes, but it persists in the soil. So it really does cause some problems. And over the years, we have really kind of witnessed this increased demand by customers and homeowners for more environmentally friendly, really reduced risk termiticides. So some people will call these reduced risk pesticides more green products, but this is really kind of the path that we see insecticides taking. So when talking about subterranean termite control options, really the objective, no matter what method is used, it is to protect a structure, right? So we have talked about how your home is your largest investment and termite damage is not going to be covered by homeowners insurance. So really this is the overall objective of termite control. And there are barrier techniques that we're going to discuss, and there's also population management approaches that we're going to discuss as well. So with barrier techniques, the goal is to exclude termites from structures so they can't damage it. And those kind of techniques usually involve something like a liquid treatment, a liquid termiticide, or a physical barrier that termites can't penetrate through to get to your home. When we talk about population management, we're really kind of talking about controlling overall populations of termites. So targeting colonies, eliminating them to reduce the risk to your home. And baits are a very good example of what we use in a population management approach. So let's review a little bit about what we know so far about subterranean termite colonies. So, of course, they nest under soil, like the name subterranean implies. They will nest also within trees and structures. They can have multiple satellite nests, which they will be able to travel back and forth between those nests through underground foraging tunnels. We have Formosan subterranean termites that can create this carton nest that you can see in the lower right hand corner. So this carton nest is it's a nest that they build using soil and their frass and saliva and wood that they have chewed on. Formosan colonies can also form aerial nests, so they can form these above ground nests that don't have any kind of soil contact, so that makes them a little bit more difficult to detect as well. Signs of infestation are a lot more difficult to find when dealing with subterranean termites. So like I've said, subterranean termites will nest and feed in multiple wood resources. So they can have different satellite nests. They could be feeding on a tree in your yard and within your home, and they are connected between these resources linked by underground tunnels. So a single structure can either have a single termite colony infesting it, or it could be multiple colonies. But these colonies can have these satellite nests. So if you have termites nesting within a tree in your front yard, they could also be really affecting your home as well. So there are certain signs of infestation that are very characteristic to subterranean termites. Some of these include mud tubes and swarm structures. So subterranean termites will create these shelter tubes when they forage above the soil level, and this helps protect them, right? So they're little soft-bodied insects. They are very vulnerable to predation and drying out, and these mud tubes actually will prevent them from drying out, and it helps protect them from things like ants, which are a huge predator of termites. In the lower left-hand corner, you can see these swarm structures. And what those are is during swarm season, which for most subterranean termites, it's right now the swarm season. Those are the structures that the reproductive termites will fly out of to start new colonies. So that's a very good indicator of an active termite infestation. Termite swarmings and wings, this is also a very good indicator that there may be a termite infestation. So our native reticulotermes will swarm during the day in the early spring, and Formosan subterranean termites will swarm at night, but from May to July. And it's pretty inevitable, at least here in New Orleans, that if termites are swarming outside, a few of them will probably get inside of your home. So you may find a few wings or a few termite swarmers here and there. But a sign of infestation would be, say, if you have thousands of termites coming from inside a wall in your house. That's what we mean by termite swarming could be a sign of infestation. So infested trees around your home could be a sign of a termite problem. So you could find mud tubes all along the bark of the tree or at the base of the tree. And, like we've discussed, they could be feeding on and foraging along multiple food resources. So if a tree in your yard is infested, you really do want to consider termite protection from your home, for your home as well. So let's get to the nitty-gritty of some of the treatment options that are on the market today. So first I want to talk about borate treatments. These are treatments that contain the element boron, which is a stomach poison for termites. So this is something that is applied during the construction process. And the goal here would be to treat all of the lumber that is used to build a home or a structure of any kind. So it can be applied as a spray, a powder, or a foam. And the idea here is that you coat the surface of the wood with this, and if termites try to feed on it, then they are going to die because it is a stomach poison. And there are plenty of available products on the market today that are considered borate treatments. They all have the active ingredient disodium octaborate tetrahydrate. Okay, and the active ingredient is the lethal component of a pesticide. You're going to hear active ingredient used plenty of times during this presentation. Now, borate treatments are not recommended as a standalone treatment where termite pressure is extremely high. This is not something that would be recommended along the Gulf South where we have Formosan subterranean termites. And when I say high termite pressure, that means that there can be a lot of colonies in a relatively small area. Okay, so when the termite risk is high. But of course, you always want to check with your local Department of Ag for regulations with using this product. So physical barriers, there are a few of these on the market today for termite control. And the concept with physical barriers would be, as you probably have guessed, is to seal off all of the pest entry points to make it impossible for termites to enter your home. So there are aggregate barriers on the market. So there's particle barriers such as Term from Polyguard, pictured here. This is something that can be installed around the perimeter of a structure or within bath traps where you're going to have plumbing penetrations. And the idea here is that this aggregate consists of particles that are too large for termites to move with their mandibles to create, shelter tubes or anything like that. So they can't move them out of the way. but they're small enough that they can get packed together tight enough that they can't move through them either. So the idea here is if they can't move them or they can't tunnel through them, then it's going to protect your home from termite infestation. So there are also membranes and sealants on the market. This is a product also from Term and Polyguard. So these membranes are flexible, stretchable, termite-resistant membranes that can be applied during the construction process. Okay, so this membrane provides waterproofing and vapor proofing, and it's also used for pest prevention. So you can have the membrane along the outside of the building that's being constructed, as you can see in the top picture, and the bottom picture you can see the sealant that it's used in conjunction with. That can be placed around things like plumbing penetrations that can also prevent termites from entering the structure. Stainless steel mesh, such as Termamesh and Termastop, are also really well-known physical barriers on the market. So this is a mesh. It's made with marine-grade stainless steel mesh. These are installed during the construction process. And how it works is that it will block all of these entry points. So they're put around things like plumbing penetrations and bath traps and along cold joints that will prevent termites from entering into the structure. So it's not going to rust, it's marine grade, stainless steel, and termites are not going to be able to chew through it or move through it. However, it does need to be installed by a trained professional. This is certainly not a do-it-yourself kind of job. Termite shields are quite common on raised houses here. So termite shields are a metal barrier that are placed on top of pilings during the construction process. So it's between the pilings and the flooring in a raised house. And what this does is, as you can see in the picture here, termites won't be able to move through it. So if they are attempting to gain entrance into your home, they're going to have to build mud tubes around it. And what that does is it allows the inspectors to notice termite infestations a lot sooner and a lot easier. So this is something that you can recommend to your builder to include because, of course, it is installed during construction. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about liquid termiticides now. These are the termite control products that most people are very familiar with. When using liquid termiticides, the goal is to protect the structure from foraging termites. So this is used for active subterranean termite infestations, and it's used as a preventative treatment, and it's also used as a pre-treatment before any kind of slab is poured for new construction. And the concept here is that a liquid termiticide can be used to create a barrier around the entire structure, which is very important when you consider all the ways that subterranean termites can enter into your home. So here is the diagram again depicting some of these satellite colonies and potential points of entry into your home. So plumbing penetrations, if there is a crack in the concrete slab or through expansion joints, any kind of wood to ground contact, those are really typical ways that termites can enter your home. So in order to choose a termite control option that is best for your home, it's always super important to understand the construction of your house. Okay, so when using liquid termiticides, if you want that complete barrier around your home, you're going to need to kind of understand your construction a little bit, whether it's a slab house or a raised house, things like that. So liquid termiticide treatments can be either repellent or non-repellent. Repellents, as the name implies, will repel termites from the structure. So termites will not want to cross through any kind of treated soil. Whereas non-repellents termites will cross through the treated soil because it's not repelling them, and the termites will die from pesticide exposure. And here I have listed just a few examples of each kind, a repellent and non-repellent, but of course that list is not exhaustive. So why would we want to use a non-repellent? Because at first glance, it may seem really counterintuitive, right? So we have termites tunneling under the soil surface, and if you use a non-repellent, then they're going to be tunneling through that treated soil without any kind of avoidance. And if you use a repellent, that can also lead to low mortality because termites aren't wanting to cross that soil barrier. Now, termites can exploit really, really small gaps within the soil profile. So 1/32 of an inch wide gap is all you need for a termite to gain access to your home. So if you have a repellent termiticide put down and then you go and plant something in a flower bed within that treated zone, or if there's a small gap in the treatment during when the treatment's being performed, you could have an issue with termites breaching that chemical barrier. Okay, so a non-repellent can also be transferred between nestmates through their natural behavior, right? So termites are constantly touching each other, so they're always grooming each other, they're sharing food, they are doing something called Trophallaxis, which is exchanging regurgitated nutrients back and forth. And it's because they don't know when they are tunneling through treated soil, if it's treated with a non-repellent, then you have termites coming in direct contact with treated soil, and those termites are going to die. And if the termiticide works slowly, then the termites that have crossed through the treated soil, they actually have enough time to come in contact with other termites, exposing more termites to the pesticide, which will affect other individuals within that colony. So a pre-construction liquid treatment is a treatment of the soil surface just before the slab is poured for new construction. Okay, it's not mandated by law, but you always want to check with your state regulators, and it's a really good option to go with when building any kind of new construction where termite risk is high. Again, it's really important to understand the foundation type when doing pre-construction liquid treatments. Okay, because pre-treatments can require multiple treatments. Okay, so if a slab is poured with more than one pour occurring there, a technician is going to have to come out multiple times before each section of that slab is poured. And then after construction is complete, then there's going to be another final perimeter treatment performed. So again, here's some diagrams depicting the different kinds of slabs that are used in construction today. So again, it's really important to understand what kind of construction you're dealing with, especially with these pre-treats. Okay, so a monolithic slab, for example, that's going to be done in one single concrete pour. So that may just require a technician to come out once and do a pre-treatment, and then the slab is poured. However, some of these other ones, like a supported slab, partially supported, and floating slab, that's going to require more than one concrete pour during construction. So that's going to be multiple visits by the technician to do it properly. And here are just some examples of different foundation types that we have here in Louisiana. Again, it's always important to know the construction of your house, to understand the pest entry points and all the potential ways that termites can gain entrance into your home. A post-construction liquid treatment is something that would follow the pre-treat after construction is done. And this is something that is put down as a liquid barrier around the perimeter of your home or of a structure. So typically this involves digging a trench in the soil around the perimeter of your home and treating that trench, and then treating the soil as it is filled back into that trench. If there's hollow block foundations, those will have to be drilled and treated with either a liquid or a foam. if there's kind of a raised porch that has dirt fill in there, those are going to have to be drilled and treated as well. Garden beds can either be treated with rotting or by digging a trench. Sometimes that is sometimes customers like to have that rotted rather than trenching because they put a lot of work in their garden beds and they don't want them messed up by digging a trench through it. And also cold joints and seams in the concrete are going to have to be drilled and treated as well. And you always want to check with the label and local regulators regarding minimum treatment specifications. Okay, but here in Louisiana, a trench is dug. It's got to be 4 inches by 6 inches. If there's no soil access, then you'll find that it's required to drill through the concrete to gain access to that soil. And then when that trench is treated, you'll also have to treat the soil backfill as you're filling that trench in with soil. Now, there are some things on the market here. This is the Termidor HP unit. Okay, so this is something a bit newer on the market. And what this does is this uses hydraulic trenching method. So it actually uses this high pressure to inject liquid termiticide around the perimeter of a home. And so instead of having to dig a trench, you have this machine that will actually inject the dirt around your home with liquid termiticide. So this will eliminate the requirement to dig that trench. So I'm going to move on to baiting technology and how we use it in population management. So when we talk about population management, one question that I always kind of pose to the audience is, how do you kill a termite? Okay, seems a little basic. But, you have chemical treatments, those can kill individual termites, right? If you remove part of the nest, like the carton nest, you can kill plenty of individual termites. Or, you could do something like you could step on a termite to kill it. That would certainly kill a termite. And that does seem a little bit silly and a little outrageous, but it's making the point that any of these methods, it's not going to eliminate a termite colony to actually manage those populations. So when we think about a termite colony, let's remember that colonies can contain millions of individual termites. Okay, so we like to view colonies as entire organisms in and of themselves. Okay, so you have a queen that's constantly producing eggs. Colonies can have multiple queens, so you can have multiple queens constantly producing eggs. You can have very high termite pressure like you have here in New Orleans, so you can have many, many colonies in a relatively small area. And termite risk is pretty high along the Gulf states, right? So when we use baits for population management, what exactly does that mean and how exactly do baits work? So baits exploit the social behavior of termites. So we've talked about how termites are always constantly foraging. And through their natural foraging tendencies, then you'll have individual termites come into contact with a bait station. And workers will eat this bait and they will find it very palatable. And they will lay down feeding pheromones to communicate to other termites that they want to go to that bait station and start eating as well. And termites tend to forage in areas with a high moisture and cellulose resources, and they will continue to forage even when a large cellulose resource is located. So even if termites are feeding on your house or a tree in your front yard, they will continue to forage and they'll still be able to locate those bait stations. Okay, and again, termites can exploit very, very small gaps within a treatment zone. So just keep that in mind as well. So termites do something called trophallaxis as well as food sharing. So trophallaxis, as I've said before, that's a social mechanism within termites, and it's an exchange of regurgitated liquid between colony members, which does sound pretty gross, and I apologize because it is lunchtime. However, termites rely on gut bacteria and protozoa in order to digest cellulose, and they have to share that gut fauna with each other in order to keep the colony going. Okay, and in termites, some castes cannot even feed themselves. So soldiers have these really large mandibles, for example. They're not able to use those to feed on wood. So they rely on workers to feed them, and the queen as well. She will rely on workers to come and bring her food. So baits can take advantage of this because this means that individual termites don't have to feed on the bait directly in order to be affected by it. So you have workers feeding on a bait product and they are able to spread it throughout the colony through their normal food sharing behaviors. And there are plenty of products on the market. Here's a list of the ones on the market today, just in alphabetical order. So there's Advanced, there's Xterra, First Line, there's Centricon, and there's Terminate. Most people have heard of either Centricon or the Advanced system, but there are plenty others on the market as well. And there are certain characteristics that are required for a termite bait to really be efficient when using it. Of course, you don't want to have any kind of feeding deterrence of that bait product. You want it to be super palatable to termites and you want them to think that it's absolutely delicious, right? So you also want it to be slow acting. And at first, this may not make much sense. But if an insecticide acts too fast on subterranean termites, then you're not going to have any kind of opportunity or lag time that allows for that transfer and food sharing so that the workers can share it with other members of the colony. Another thing to think about is termites are actually pretty smart. If you have a fast-acting insecticide and you have this accumulation of dead and dying termites in a certain area, say near the bait station, other termites are going to avoid that area because they're going to know that there is something wrong with that area of that they're foraging in, and they will actually close it off and they will just kind of bury their dead and leave them there. Baits also need to be dose independent. So that just means that the bait is going to work whether termites eat a little of it or a lot of it. And there have been some different active ingredients on the market with different modes of actions. There have been metabolic inhibitors. So again, these are more like stomach poisons. You have the borates and the sulfuramide, things like that. And nowadays we see a lot of baits with insect growth regulators. So we've seen baits with juvenile hormones in them. And a lot of the baits today will have chitin synthesis inhibitors, which were introduced in the late 1980s. So these are the novafluoron and the novaluron. So like the advanced stations and the Centricon stations, that's what the active ingredient is. And what a chitin synthesis inhibitor does is it prevents termites from molting. Okay, so termites have to molt throughout their entire life. And if they're not able to, then those individual termites are going to die, right? And through food sharing, then that effect is spread throughout the entire colony. Installation of in-ground stations is pretty much the same, no matter what product you're using. However, you do want to check the label for correct spacing of the stations around the building. Most labels will say, you know, don't place the stations more than 20 feet apart. However, because we're at such high termite risk here in New Orleans, we always use 10-foot spacing here. It's always a good idea to place stations near conducive conditions, just so you can have higher hit rates. And termites will be more attracted to or they will more easily find those bait stations because it's already a conducive condition. Termites are already attracted to it. But anyway, the installation is pretty simple. You put a hole in the ground where the station's going to fit. You insert the station into the soil and you make that the station flush with the soil surface. But what happens if you don't have any access to the soil? A perfect example here is the French Quarter, which is full of, you know, streets and sidewalks and everything is just concrete, right? Well, in order to install a bait station where there's concrete, You need to core through the concrete until you reach the soil. And then you can install the station within that soil, and then you can cover it with a port cover that are actually, they can be supplied by our office here. There are also options to use above ground baits, which not all bait systems have this option, but it's a really great option to have. It allows for really targeted application. If there's live termites, there's an active infestation, this is a great option to have. These are essentially boxes. You can see the plastic box there, but you can also use a flexible station nowadays, which is kind of a plastic pouch that can be applied. And these can go directly over things like mud tubes or breakouts in a wall where termites are known to be actively foraging. So this allows the active ingredient to be placed directly on a feeding site. So instead of waiting for termites to forage and finding a bait station, you're basically just putting a bait station on top of termites so that they can find it really, really fast and start feeding on that bait. So these are a great option. They fits the population management concept of colony elimination. You can have very flexible station placement, and it can help you overcome multiple challenges with non-traditional construction or common wall construction, or if you don't have any kind of soil access, or if it's a Formosan colony that is an aerial colony as well. So some advantages and disadvantages of baits. So one really good thing about baits is the low mammalian toxicity, which people really kind of gravitate towards. Like I said earlier, there has really been a much higher demand for these lower risk insecticides. It's very target specific. It can seem less intrusive than a trench and treat or drilling through concrete every foot to apply a soil termiticide. They can be placed directly on the structure. They can also really affect large colony populations. So whether it's a small colony or a large colony, that colony can be eliminated through the use of baits. And it certainly can be a standalone treatment. So it doesn't require a soil liquid termiticide around the perimeter of the structure to put bait stations down. Liquids and baits are mutually exclusive. I have seen both of them work very, very well for mitigating termite damage to a structure and helping protect structures. And if baits, however, are used in conjunction with a liquid treatment, we always advise that baits should not be installed within that treatment zone. So what happens if you put baits inside of a soil treatment zone is that you may have termites dying close to that treatment zone. Again, you don't want termites to be repelled by that area because there are other dead and dying termites around there. And it's really going to affect your bait stations getting hit by the actual termites. Okay, but some disadvantages can be, depending on the product that you're using. Products nowadays, a couple of them can be put in the ground and then serviced a year later. Others, the label may say that every quarter they need to be serviced. So the disadvantage there kind of really depends on the frequency that you have to check the stations. And probably the biggest disadvantage of baits that I've seen is that you certainly don't get that instant gratification, right, of being able to see termites die or see a barrier be put around your house. It does take time for termites, foraging termites, to locate those bait stations. And it also does take time to get control over that termite population. Okay, it can take a few months, actually, depending on the size of the colony, from the time that termites start feeding on that bait to the time that that colony is eliminated. So that can be a little bit tough for homeowners to handle, knowing that, okay, well, even if I put the bait down now and termites start feeding on it, they're still going to be around for 6 to 12 weeks for that colony to be eliminated. And there are also gaps between the stations, between 10 and 20 feet. So bait stations are not just a magical barrier that you put around destruction and you never have to worry about it. So termites can find gaps within those between those bait stations, of course. But if there's termites in the area, the chances of them finding those bait stations through their foraging tendencies is pretty high, especially if you're putting them in areas that with additional conducive conditions for termites. So one question that I'm always asked about bait stations is, well, if I have termites in my house and I use baits to eliminate that colony and that colony's dead, can I just take those bait stations up? Can I stop paying my renewal fee? Well, one study that we've done was right outside of the French Quarter, in an area called Louis Armstrong Park. And this is a very large green space just outside the French Quarter with a very long history of infestation. Okay, it was a major research site for termites between 1998 and 2014. And previous studies have always described this as kind of a model for these large, stable colonies within this park. These colonies being delineated through either genetic analysis or mark release recapture methods. And so what has happened, once the termite colonies were originally delineated back in 2002, then they were eliminated through the use of baits. Okay, so all the colonies were wiped out, and then those bait stations were taken out of the park once again, so that we could monitor the reinvasion by neighboring and other opportunistic colonies. And so the colonies within the park increased after the baits were removed, and within 5 years, the park had the same level of termite pressure as there was before the original colonies were eliminated by baiting. So if you take bait stations out of the ground, in this instance, with the high termite pressure that we have, it only took 5 years for all those buildings and structures and trees to be at risk yet again and infested yet again. And when I talk about using baits in areas with high termite pressure, I always like to use a specific example from Armstrong Park. So this is a picture of an island in the middle of Armstrong Park, where there were 4 colonies delineated. So there was 1 Reticulotermes colony and 3 Formosan subterranean termite colonies. So bait was installed where this yellow colony is. And over time, while this colony is shrinking in size and its foraging territory, therefore, is shrinking in size, we can see this red colony is expanding its foraging territory. And once that yellow colony is eliminated, then we have the red colony moving completely into that area that was previously occupied by the yellow colony. So again, in areas with high termite pressure, this is an excellent example where you can have multiple colonies in a relatively small space. And if you eliminate one, then another one is just right behind it, ready to take its place. And at this time, I am going to pass it over to Dr. Claudia Riegel.
Thank you so much,
We'll be discussing fumigation.
All right, let me just share my screen. And here we go. All right, well, thank you so much. So I'm just making sure everyone can hear me. And I'm going to talk about fumigation. So fumigation is essentially, right, we're going to talk about what it is and why do we fumigate. and also some very sort of high level description here, but what are the steps in fumigation? So as you're driving around your city, oftentimes you'll see these houses that are these structures that are tented, and I'm going to tell you why they're doing it. Well, a fumigant is a pesticide that works in the gaseous state. So it's a gas, right? And just as a reminder here, there's 3 physical states of pesticides. One is going to be gas, which is a fumigant, which we're talking about today. We see liquids, right? Aerosols, emulsifiable concentrates, solutions, and also there are solids. So wettable powders, dust, and granular, pesticides are those examples. And so fumigation actually is pretty common across a lot of different areas of, the world here. And one which is very big is commodities. So here's a cargo ship. Many times these containers are fumigated at the port of where it is departing from. In some cases, it's fumigated upon arrival. And then there's also fumigation in many cases, especially for grains, things like that, where the fumigation actually happens in the hull of the ship. Soil fumigation, that's actually my background, right? Fumigating soil for different plant parasites, nematodes, some fungi as well. But today we're really going to focus on structural fumigation. So you can see this is one of the city buildings, needed some special equipment to get those tarps all the way up there. But that was really targeting structural issues. All right, so I also do want to mention boat fumigation. So here in New Orleans, there's water all around us, and every once in a while we'll see a boat that is tarped, and the water is a great barrier on one side, and of course they're tarping it and following the procedures for what they're doing. But in this case, we have also seen carton nest in boats, and that's also been fumigated for bed bugs as well. All right, so there's certain steps in fumigation. One, of course, is inspection is super critical, so as well as identifying that pest, measuring the structure, sealing and securing, preparing the interior, actually fumigating where you're releasing the gas, monitoring, and aeration as well. So we're going to talk about each one of these steps. If you've followed these series of webinars, you've already seen the section with termite ID. And for those that have not, you're welcome to go to our YouTube channel and watch those presentations. But we're really talking here about our dry wood termites. And so a couple of things here that are very important. A lot of times we've got our little microscope out, and we're looking for those alate wings, right? And if you're looking at drywood termites, you're looking for those cross veins that are in those wings. So very important. Also, wood damaging beetles are very common. Sometimes they come in with, furniture that you purchased, or, the building has been infested with a wood damaging beetle. So those also, we use fumigation for that. Don't forget about stored product pests. So you've got grains and rice and all kinds of different products that really require fumigation in order to eliminate these pests from their buildings. Bed bugs as well. Fumigation has become more popular for bed bug fumigation as well. And also even container fumigation. So for example, there are companies that you bring the items, put it in a small container, they'll fumigate it, and then you're able to pick it up. So just as a reminder though, for bed bugs, the treatment is the best the day that it is being fumigated, right? So you have to be very careful about not introducing bed bugs back into that structure or that vehicle or whatever it may be. All right, so there are different kinds of fumigation or different fumigants. Methyl bromide, sulfurofluoride is the one that we see that is common in structural fumigation. And then we also see chloropicrin, which is going to be that warning agent. And so methyl bromide and sulfurofluoride, odorless, colorless fumigants, but very deadly. And so it's very important to know that that gas is there. So they use chloropicrin as that warning agent. So there's lots of steps to prepare a fumigation. Here's some photographs that we took. The fumigator is going to provide a checklist to the customers, just so they know what the procedures are. They're going to remove or place the food in special bags, or remove the food or place it in special bags. Most everyone removes food. You have to remove anything that is living, the plants and the pets. Open all the doors in the rooms so that they have access and good penetration of the gas. And that pest management professional, that fumigator, is going to inspect all areas of that house. So it's very important that every door, every cabinet, every closet, everything is open, or provide the keys to those folks. These fumigants are biocides, and so it will kill living organisms, including people. So this is a very important process to make sure that everything is done. So the next step here, actually probably even before that, they've measured the structure, right? So talking about volume, so sometimes it gets pretty complicated. So volume here, length and width times height. And you got to get it correct because it costs money, right? You want to put the right dose into that volume. And very important to secure and seal the structure. And there's some processes that we're going to talk about that here, I guess. One, you're going to use tarps. Two, signage needs to be appropriate at all the entry egress points. And also secondary locks are required because you don't want that homeowner or anybody else going into that structure because they potentially could be exposed to the gas. So lots of different things here with preparation. These are big jobs typically. You're going to need some fans, and also you can see, as I mentioned, everything is open. Tarps go on the bottom. You can see the third picture actually has the release point for the fumigant over the fan, and there's a little dish there that's for chloropicrin. So it's that warning agent that's going to be applied once everything is ready. They're going to put that warning agent in to make sure that if there are any cats or dogs or people or anything, they're going to be able to see that. So for those that don't know, chloropicrin is tear gas, essentially. So it's a very strong irritant. So, everything, let's just say everything is prepared inside, everything is open, all your lines are there. So you can see the fumigators here, they've got their PPE on, which is actually pretty minimal on the grand scheme of things, because you do not want that fumigant to sit on your skin. But they do have gloves, the shields, very important. And then also they need to have a breathing apparatus, right? So an SCBA, very important that that it's a two-man team, everything is calibrated, they know how to use it, because you can't go in there and breathe that gas. So you can see these folks here are checking everything. And in fact, you can see that cylinder is sitting on a scale. And so the reason for that is to make sure that there aren't any kinks in that line and that gas is being, moved from the cylinder into the structure. So one of the things when they do identification, right, is to determine, of course, what pest are you trying to kill in that structure? Is it a beetle? Is it a termite? Is it a spider? What is it? And so these are just some examples here of ranking the caste of the termites and their susceptibility to the fumigant. So the egg is going to be the least susceptible, and that alate is going to be the most susceptible. And you can see here actually at the bottom where there's a little device there that is actually measuring any escaping gas, a fumigant. But what they did was they used sand and water, like a sand snake or even a water snake, to make sure that that seal around that structure is very tight. All right. Once the gas is in equilibrium, meaning that it is, spread equally in that structure, then it's going to be there at a certain amount of time, depending on the pest and the dose and all of that. And so that concentration is going to be figured out. So let's say you reach that concentration and maybe it's 24 hours, whatever it may be, and you're ready to go. These operators are going to come back in and aerate that structure. So you can see in the photograph, they've pulled open that structure. And please refer back to your own state on any particular rules and regulations. I know California needs to aerate from the top and have a fan out, from the top out. So please refer to your local regulations on aeration. So, that's an expensive process, right, to do that. And, when we talk about termites in general, so this is, they're very expensive. And these are very old numbers from 2003. And I'm not aware of someone who's done a big cost cost analysis. I believe there is one in Florida that is coming on pest control, but it is people spend a lot of money in treatments and prevention. And it's a big part of protecting, everyone's structure. All right, so look, this is a photograph of my own house from last year. So I'm in my house and I look, I'm like, what is going on in that window? And lo and behold, I had a termite infestation in my own house, right? And so we talked to a lot of people, and we are now entering, we are essentially in swarm season. We're waiting for those swarms to start. And people just really don't know what to do. What now? What do I do? Because they just start thinking about dollar signs and panicking. Well, I'm going to tell you a few things. If you see the termites in your house, please don't disturb them, okay? Leave the area alone. It is very difficult, but leave it alone until a pest professional can come and check it out. Don't spray any insecticides, aerosols, nothing on it, because you don't want those termites actually to leave the area. You want that pest management professional to be able to address those infestations and be able to see and do a good inspection. And so, look, once you see the termites, probably the damage has already been done. So a couple days here, either way, you're going to be fine. Waiting a few more days isn't going to cause a whole lot more damage. All right. So it's best to do things calmly and correctly. So for faster and better results, right, allow that pest management professional to have access to the active termites and be able to do their treatment, whichever treatment you decide. Leave termite work to the professionals, okay? So we see this time and time again. I'm going to do it myself. Look, I'm a DIY. I do stuff all the time. But when it comes to termite control, it's best to leave it to the professional because they're going to have tools that you are not going to have as a general, as a resident. And they have lots of different treatment options. It's really the way to go. They know the information, they've got the products, they know the methods of application. We stress this all the time. Now, I will say as a homeowner, okay, you should inspect your property all the time and look for signs of termites. And so you can see this in our one of our webinars, but if you do find damage or you have a suspect area, make sure you call a professional. We get this question all the time. It's like, who do I pick, right? So look, you want to look for a few things, and this is really targeted to the resident. And so, but if you're a pest management operator, a pest management professional on the call, these are things that we're talking about. You want to look for somebody that's been in the business, really important. You can actually even contact the Better Business Bureau, the State Department of Agriculture in your state, Attorney General. You want to make sure that there aren't complaints or even misuse of pesticides, okay? So you can do your homework on the company. You can also ask them for a list of references. Lots of people will have references. You can talk to other customers and see what they're doing. Very important is I want everybody, especially a resident, to make sure that their pest management professionals and technicians are licensed in the state that you're operating in underneath the correct categories. Very important. Each company has to have at least one certified applicator licensed in the commercial pesticide applicator in the proper service category. All right, and they have to renew that in most cases every single year. So just make sure that their licenses are current. If you're not sure, check with your Department of Ag and they will provide all the information for you. Well, there's my card. That's last year's card. So actually I have a new one. Didn't update it in here, but it gets the point across. When I flip over my card, it has all the different categories that I am licensed to do that kind of work. All right, so that's very important. It's okay to ask your pest management professional for this kind of information. Oh yeah, very important. Please provide your pest control, you can ask them for that. And then also ask them what products they're going to be using in your house. I have talked to so many residents and they have issues and I'm like, well, what did they use? I don't know. Well, they should know. That's not the pest control company's fault. That's the customer's fault. They absolutely need to understand what is going into their house. So again, look at their website, find their phone numbers, right? Are they easy to find, easy to contact if there's an issue? Are there after-hour phone numbers? All those things are important. Understand the issue, right? So that you can find a correct resolution. If you're not sure and you want to call multiple companies, great. Also look at your local universities and extension agents and folks like us at Mosquito Control, Mosquito, Termite, and Rodent Control that can provide you some information as well. If you see specimens, collect them. Really great for identification. Your pest management companies are going to be super excited about that. And also talk about construction, right? Understand how they're coming into your structure, your house. You can also look for optional certifications. There's OSHA and HAZWOPER, that's for pesticide safety. You can be a board certified entomologist. You can have an associate certified entomologist. Those are hard certifications to get. And though members of those companies have to study really hard to get those certifications. So that's a good thing. Quality Pro is another one. Find a Pro. There's a website that's through the National Pest Management Association. There's Green Shield. And then you can also look and see if they're a member of your local or state or national association. So for us here in New Orleans, it's the Greater New Orleans Pest Control Association. So ask and see if they're a member, right? So these are folks that are typically going to meetings, learning things, and getting more timely information. So look, pest control should be a partnership between the pest management professional and the customer. For any kind of residents that are listening to this call, you too have responsibility. You cannot ask a pest control company to treat your termites in a wall, but your roof is leaking. So you have to be able to work together to resolve the roof leak so that the termites actually, you perhaps get into the bait system that you installed on that wall, right? So that's just an example. So information that the customer should request, the names of the products, we talked about that already. Are there any precautionary statements that you need to know about? What's the formulation, right? Ask for an explanation how these products work. And you can go online as well and get that. You can call sort of a third party if you'd like, to get that information. And any preparation that the customer must make before the treatment. Your pest management professionals are constantly asking for certain things. Move the plants away from the house, fix the leak, whatever it may be, reduce that clutter, move the wood from underneath or next to the house, right? Do all the things that they're asking. The pest control service, again, should be a partnership. We talked about that already. So remediate those conducive conditions, right? Very important. And, these are pest experts, right? The PMP's time and experience should be valued. A lot of times they are not. These are experienced people, so value their time. And look, it's okay to say, I don't know. But let's get the right information, right? So, and that can be both ways from the customer or the company, but let's get the right information. And find your local experts in your area to discuss a consultation if you need it. Call more than one company. All right, so we're going to talk very briefly here, and we're going to wrap it up with integrated pest management. So very important here. So what is IPM? It's integrated pest management. And so it's a process, right? It's a multi-prong approach to actually resolving your problem. And so, of course, inspection is going to be important. You're going to have identification of your insect, termites in this case. Are you going to go with a fumigation, or are you going with a ground treatment? Are you going with a bait? Are you going with a liquid termiticide? We need to know what insect you are actually targeting. We're going to talk about, we already did, but the treatment that's going to be administered, and then you want to go back and monitor, right? Make sure that those bugs are actually gone. So it's a pretty holistic approach to it. So when you think about termite control and subterranean termites, move that wood that's next to your house, fix that roof and that roof leak. Those things are very important as part of that multi-prong approach. All right. So what should customers expect from a pest management professional? They too have responsibilities, right? So they're going to give you a recommendation on the conducive conditions. Here's a great example. This house actually had termites inside, but this vegetation was against the building, keeping the building very moist. So some companies are going to offer pest exclusions and add-ons. Right, so not so much for termites here, but for rodents and other pests, you can ask about that. If the pest management professional asks you to correct a problem, please do it. Sometimes it's big, so let's just get a plan to get it fixed. And you're going to have to provide that PMP with full access to the property, including the building plans when needed. You can't expect somebody to do a partial treatment of that building, your house. They need access to all of it. Look, we always tell the customers here that they should maintain regular service. So pay your bills, right? The customers, so that you can make sure that your PMPs come out. And then you need to actually talk about it with them. So a lot of times I find that as the companies come out, the homeowners aren't there, and you really don't have that interaction. So for good success, I'm recommending that you both talk to each other on a regular basis. And again, that I'm talking about it all the time, right? But that conducive condition situation is incredibly important. You really need to do it. And so, again, we've talked about this already, but the pest management professional is going to tell you what you need to do. Please do it. And again, if you pay your bills on time, there's no reason that you shouldn't have them out there doing the work. Now, when it comes to termite contracts, there are lots of different contracts out there: pre-construction, post-construction, pest control, subterranean termites, wood destroying insects. We're going to talk about it a little bit. But again, here's just the website. It talks about different contracts. But for the folks that are in different states, you're going to need to talk to your local Department of Ag in order to make sure that you fully understand these different types of contracts that are there. So what is a termite contract, right? We talked about these three different ones. Obviously, post-construction contracts are approved by the Structural Pest Commission and Louisiana Department of Ag in Louisiana. Again, other states, you're going to have to look at your own policies. And then the law requires that those that are licensed in your state to treat properly for subterranean termites to enter into a standard written contract with that property owner. So it's going to have lots of information in that contract. The standard contract usually has a retreat provision. Again, you're going to have to really look at everybody's contracts with that. Sometimes there are damage guarantees in there as well, so please review that. And company is not obligated to sell a customer a contract with a damage guarantee. All right, so those conducive conditions that you're remediating are really important. Sort of continuing on here, conducive conditions are typically listed. And failure to correct those can result in termination of contract. So it's really important that you understand what you are responsible for doing and what can void that contract. Drywood termite contracts are typically separate. Termites formisanas may require opening walls or other areas to find the infestation. So just be aware, though, that areas that are not visible, right? We want to make sure that the customer understands that due to conducive conditions present in construction at the time of the agreement is issued, there may be infestations that are not necessarily visible, right? Behind walls, places like that. That company will not be held liable for past, present, or future damage to the structure or content. So, but again, please review your local laws. So there is a thing called the wood destroying insect report. Typically, we're going to see those at houses that are being sold. And again, each state is different. In Louisiana, if you've got a mortgage on your house, all companies are going to require that you have a wood destroying insect report, and make sure you find somebody that is going to do a good job here, really get into that structure so that they're really doing the best that they can do to observe any damage or any active, infestation. The Louisiana Department of Ag and Forestry, that's LDAF for us, look, they're the regulators here. They're designed as the state's lead agency in regulation of pesticide use and application. They're our friends and partners, all right? So it is always good to call and ask. They're very friendly. They love to talk about the regulations. So if you have a question, just call them and ask, right? And they oversee licensing and training training programs, pesticide application for applicators. They oversee worker protection. They also register pesticides for sale in the state. So very, very important. There's lots of resources out there for the consumer. And actually, you can see this photograph here is the tiny termite house. This is through pestworld.org, I think is where you can go find that. But lots of resources here: universities, national and local pest associations, the Pest Management Alliance program. That's the branch of NPMA, National Pest Management, responsible for consumer education. Google them, right? So there's lots of great things that they do. Federal agencies and local agencies as well. So in summary here, there are a lot of different variety of termite management strategies that are out there. And hopefully this program here, this presentation, should have provided a greater understanding of your options. And again, if you need more information, go see your local resources. You can always reach out to us as well. And look, it is really important for homeowners to understand that products available for termite control, they need to understand it in order to make a really good informed decision. Termite control is primarily a professional market, right? So, and remember that our pest management professionals have the expertise and the tools available. So with that, I'm going to kick it over back to, I believe, Carrie, and thank you for your time today.
Okay, fantastic. Thank you, Claudia. Stacy, I am going to ask, are there any questions that you saw in the chat?
Yes. How far can satellite nests be from the primary nest?
So foraging territories can be rather large. Okay, and the foraging territories are normally determined using either mark recapture methods or genetic analysis, right? So kind of a rule of thumb when you're talking about foraging territories is you think about a football field. So it's pretty impressive. These are Formosa and subterranean termites that I'm talking about. So they can have multiple satellite nests within, say, a football field.
Okay. Can termites come up under your house and bypass the perimeter termite treatment?
Yes, they can. That's why we like to have that pre-treat before the slab is poured, right? So that is part of that liquid barrier pretty much that you're going to be putting down before that slab is poured. So, and you can also get cracks in your slab that termites can come up through as well. That's why a thorough termite inspection always needs to include things like plumbing penetrations, the slab itself, things like that.
Okay. I don't see any more questions in the chat. Oh, here's another one. If your house
Okay.
is raised, can they just come up in the center and bypass the perimeter treatment?
Come up in this, okay, I'm assuming that that's like the center of a piling or something like that is what I'm assuming. So yes, they can. More than likely you would find mud tubes on the outside of, say, a wooden piling. But if your house is raised and let's say that it is those brick pilings, just cut them up in a tunnel in the dirt that is not treated. Yes, they can. Yes, they can. And keep in mind that termites don't need a large gap in that soil treatment to breach that. How deep are their nests? It really kind of depends on so many factors. So they're not super deep, at least here in New Orleans. So we have a pretty high water table. And if there's a lot of clay in the soil, they're not going to be tunneling through that as readily as they would like sandy loam soil and things like that. So they're not super deep. I don't have the numbers in front of me as far as, how many feet can you go down and still find termites. I can try to look that up and get back to you though.
Okay, I have 2 trees cut down and both have termites. Do I contact the company to come out before having the stump grinded?
That is such a great question. I love that you asked that. So if you have tree stumps that have termites, what I would recommend, right? So what we've learned is that the termites that are infesting those stumps, they are continuously foraging, and so your house could be at risk, right? So my suggestion would be to treat those termites before having somebody come out to grind your stump. And probably you might want to consider a bait treatment to eliminate those colonies completely. And then have those stumps ground down. That way you know that those colonies have been eliminated, so that reduces the risk to your home. These are some great questions.
Okay, I'm not seeing any others, just giving people a minute to type just to see if anything is going to pop up. No, I think that's all the questions we have.
I should grind before.
Oh, she said, thank you for your answer because a company stated she should grind them before they come out.
Ah, okay.
Okay.
Well, they
So-
might have said that because we are on the cusp of swarm season here, and you might see some termites swarming from there, but I still suggest that you eliminate those colonies completely to reduce the risk to your house.
Okay, I don't see any more questions in the chat.
Okay, well, thank you,
thank
everybody.
Part 4 will be on May 19th. The topic is protecting our trees from termites. We'll be starting at 12 p.m. Central Standard Time. Everyone have a good afternoon.
All right, thank you.